Elegant subscribe line. Insert right after the final "Hoya." If a story this raw still moves you, do what the finest operators do when they find one of their own. Lock in, join the platoon, and tap the subscribe button so this channel can keep telling the legends that history tries to bury. The Coronado sun was a blowtorch that July morning in 2024, turning the blacktop grinder into a skillet that could fry eggs on a recruit's forehead. Recruits called it the place where dreams came to bleed, and on this particular dawn the air smelled of salt, diesel, and the metallic tang of fear. At 0500 sharp, Class 324 snapped into perfect rows, boots grinding salt crystals into the asphalt so hard the sound carried across the bay. In the very back row, smaller than every shadow around her, stood a lone female figure, 5'6", maybe 125 pounds soaking wet, hair twisted into a regulation bun so tight it looked sharp enough to slice paper. Her name tag read Rivera, E. No first name taped beneath, no expression, and no voice. Everyone already knew she was mute. Congenital vocal cord paralysis diagnosed at birth. The instructors had nicknamed her Ghost because when they screamed Rivera during roll call she never answered. She simply snapped to parade rest so violently her boot heels cracked together like a rifle shot. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Malone, a man whose neck was thicker than most men's thighs and whose voice could peel paint off a destroyer, paced the front row with his stainless steel coffee mug steaming in the chill. Listen up, Boat Crew 7. Today you meet the swim buddy who's about to make the next 6 months feel like a Disney cruise. He jerked a thumb over his shoulder. Say hello to the girl who somehow rang the bell at Great Lakes, crushed Mountain Phase at Fort Bragg, and still managed to ghost into Beauty/S without ever opening her mouth. Rumor has it she types faster than most of you can lie about your pull-up count. A ripple of laughter rolled through the ranks like surf. 6 United States Marines on a joint exchange program, big, tatted, fresh from the School of Infantry at Camp Geiger, stood in the second row grinning like wolves who'd spotted a lone deer. Their leader, Staff Sergeant Caleb "Brick" Morrison, all 220 pounds of South Carolina farm boy muscle and Copenhagen grin, leaned sideways to his fire team leader. $10 says the quiet chick quits before breakfast. 20 says she cries first. Rivera never blinked. Her eyes, the color of winter steel over the Atlantic, simply tracked Malone as he continued the brief. At 0600 they hit the surf for log PT. The Pacific that morning was furious, whitecaps slapping faces like wet towels and sucking the breath out of lungs that thought they were tough. Instructors screamed for telephone pole logs, 6 people per log, 250 pounds of waterlogged Douglas fir balanced on raw shoulders. Rivera grabbed the rear spot on log 3 without being told. Brick, by cruel coincidence or divine comedy, ended up directly in front of her. Every time the logs slammed down on their shoulders during the up-down drills, he made sure to drive his elbows backward, trying to catch her in the ribs or sternum. She absorbed every shot without a sound, legs churning water like pistons, core locked so tight the log never dipped an inch on her side. By the third evolution, Brick was breathing like a broken accordion, veins bulging in his forehead, while Rivera's rhythm never wavered. During the 5-minute smoke break between evolutions, Brick cornered her by the gear cages where the instructors couldn't see. 5 of his boys formed a loose half-moon behind him, blocking escape and sight lines. The grinder smelled of neoprene and testosterone. "Hey, sweetheart," Brick said loud enough for half the class to hear. "This ain't the WNBA. You tap out now, nobody blames you." He flicked the tiny silver trident pin to her collar, a pre-BUD/S pipeline badge nobody in the open class was supposed to have. "That thing fake? Or did you steal it off a museum dummy?" Rivera looked up at him slowly. She reached into the cargo pocket of her UDT shorts, pulled out a black Sharpie the size of a .50 cal round, uncapped it with her teeth, and wrote 3 words across the palm of her left hand in block letters. "Want to try?" Brick threw his head back and laughed so hard he had to wipe his eyes with the hem of his cami blouse. "Tell you what, Ghost. You and me, right now, king of the hill circle on the grinder. You put me down clean, my boys carry your ruck for the rest of the week. I put you down, you ring that brass bell and disappear forever. Deal?" The class formed a loose ring faster than a wildfire jumps a road. Phones came out. Someone started a 30-second timer on their G-Shock. Instructors were busy screaming at another boat crew 200 yards away. Nobody noticed the crowd swelling to 40 recruits. Rivera nodded once. Sharp. Brick charged like an SEC linebacker blitzing a freshman quarterback. Going low for the double-leg takedown he'd used to flatten rugby players back home in Clemson. She slipped left at the last millisecond, caught his right wrist with both hands, and used his own momentum to spin him 270 degrees face-first into the asphalt. Before he could recover, she was behind him. Right arm threaded under his chin in a rear-naked choke. Legs scissoring his torso like a python claiming lunch. Brick thrashed, all 220 pounds of farm boy muscle suddenly useless against perfect leverage and timing. His face turned the color of a ripe tomato. 22 seconds from first contact, he slapped the grinder twice. Tap, tap. The circle went dead silent except for the distant crash of surf. Brick's 5 Marines rushed in at once. A wall of camouflage and rage. What happened next was uploaded to anonymous servers, downloaded by every SEAL on the West Coast, and deleted within hours by embarrassed brass. But the clip still lives in dark corners of the internet, slowed down frame by frame by operators who study it like Zapruder film. Rivera dropped into a low horse stance, palms open, weight on the balls of her feet. The first Marine, a 6'3" staff sergeant from Ohio, threw a looping right haymaker she ducked under, driving her shoulder into his solar plexus and flipping him over her hip in one motion. He landed flat on his back with the wind knocked out of him so hard his boots left skid marks. Number 2 came high with a football tackle. She sidestepped, caught his helmet with both hands, and redirected his face into the asphalt with a gentle push that looked almost polite. 3 and 4 charged together from opposite sides. She caught both punches mid-swing, crossed their arms like twisting rope, then drove her heel into the back of the left Marine's knee while yanking the right one forward. They collided forehead to forehead with a crack that echoed off the barracks. Number 6, a wiry corporal from Chicago, hesitated half a second, just long enough for Rivera to close distance and deliver a palm strike to his clavicle that sat him down so hard the pavement spider-webbed beneath him. 37 seconds from Brick's initial charge to the last man down. Not a bead of sweat on her brow. Not a single word spoken. Chief Malone's voice suddenly boomed across the grinder like God clearing his throat. What in the absolute hell is this? A dance recital at Coachella? He stormed over, took one look at 6 United States Marines groaning on the ground and one tiny woman standing calmly in the center, and did something nobody in Class 324 had ever seen. He started clapping slow, deliberate, the sound carrying across the entire compound. Rivera! Front and center. Double time. She jogged over, halted 2 paces in front of him, eyes locked 6 inches above his head. Malone stared down at her, fighting a grin that threatened to split his face in half. You just assaulted 6 members of the United States Marine Corps on federal property. That's a court-martial in any other universe. Rivera pulled out her waterproof notepad, scribbled fast with the same Sharpie, and held it up. They started it. Also, they're fine. Just ego bruises. Malone glanced at Brick, who was now sitting up cradling his elbow and looking like he'd just met the business end of a freight train. Morrison, you agree with that assessment, Staff Sergeant? Brick spat a mouthful of blood onto the grinder, then shocked every soul watching by laughing, deep, from the belly. Chief, she's the realest thing I've seen since Paris Island. I want that woman on my fire team yesterday. The grinder erupted in cheers. Someone started chanting, "Ghost! Ghost!" And it spread until even the instructors across the compound turned to look. That night the clip leaked anyway. By 0400 it had 4.2 million views on a burner TikTok account before the algorithm nuked it into oblivion. Someone slowed the footage to 0.25 speed and noticed something impossible. Rivera's lips were moving the entire fight. No sound, but she was counting. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Timing every strike, every breath, every heartbeat like a metronome only she could hear. That was the first twist nobody saw coming. The second twist arrived 3 weeks later, on the Tuesday of Hell Week that the instructors lovingly called break you day. Boat Crew 7 was down to 4 souls. Surf torture had claimed 2 members at 0200. Hypothermia another at 0330. They were on the steel pier at 0400, carrying their IBS, inflatable boat, small, overhead while instructors hosed them with freezing water straight from the bay. The temperature was 48 degrees air, 52 water, wind whipping at 25 knots. Rivera's hands were bleeding where the rubber gunnels had torn the skin from her palms, but she refused to let the boat dip even a fraction of an inch. Their boat leader, a former D1 quarterback from Alabama named Pettis, finally cracked. "I can't do this anymore, man. I can't." His knees buckled. He dropped his corner. The 400-pound boat flipped, landing square on Rivera's head and pinning her beneath 6 feet of black water. She went under, didn't come up. Pettis lost his mind, started screaming for corpsmen like a man watching his sister drown. Instructors dove in. 30 seconds stretched into a minute. They found her pinned under the keel, unconscious, not breathing, lips already blue. Independent duty corpsman Doc Ramirez dragged her out, started CPR on the pier while the entire class stood frozen in a semicircle, watching the mute girl turn the color of winter steel. 1 compression, 2, 3. On the 5th compression her eyes snapped open like someone flipped a switch. She coughed once, violent, explosive, rolled onto her side, and puked a gallon of seawater across the steel grating like a fire hose. Doc tried to hold her down for oxygen. She pushed him off with one hand, stood up on legs that shouldn't have worked, walked straight back to the overturned boat, and lifted her corner alone until Pettis and the others stumbled back into position. Malone just stared, speechless for the first time in his 24-year career. Later, in medical, the doctors found the 3rd twist. Rivera wasn't just mute. She had a rare genetic mutation, myostatin deficiency, the same condition that produces Belgian blue cattle with double the muscle mass. Her fast twitch fibers were off the charts, lactic threshold higher than any human on record. The Navy had known since she was 17. They'd recruited her straight out of high school after she stopped an active shooter at Widefield High School in Colorado Springs armed with nothing but a fire extinguisher, perfect spatial awareness, and willingness to run toward gunfire while everyone else ran away. The file was so heavily redacted even Malone only had the cover sheet. It read, in block letters, Subject Rivera, E. Priority asset, eyes only. But the biggest twist was still waiting in the dark. Week 22, SERE School, Fort Bragg. Survival, evasion, resistance, escape. The resistance phase. Students get captured, thrown into a mock POW camp, interrogated for 48 hours straight. No sleep, sensory overload, stress positions, the full menu. Rivera's team lasted 9 hours before the interrogators broke them one by one. Names, ranks, serial numbers traded for a blanket and a cot. Except Rivera. They put her in solitary, blasted Slayer at 120 decibels, deprived her of sleep for 62 hours, waterboarded her twice. She never spoke, couldn't. But she also never signed the confession form they slid under the door every hour. On the 2nd night, at 0347, she used a splinter from the wooden bench to pick the lock on her handcuffs, took down 3 guards in under 6 seconds, carotid restraint, pressure point knockout, zip-tie disarm, stole the master key ring, and freed every single member of her platoon before the instructors even realized the exercise had been compromised. The camp commander, a grizzled Marine colonel with 2 Purple Hearts from Fallujah, called Sockham personally on a secure line. "I've been doing this shit since Vietnam," he said, voice shaking. "That girl just rewrote the entire curriculum. We need to change the locks, the protocols, the zip ties, everything." Word spread up the chain faster than monsoon rain. By the time Class 324 returned to Coronado, the legend of the ghost had grown its own zip code. Then came the night that almost ended her. Week 25, offshore on the USS Somerset for live-fire VBSS training. Visit, board, search, seizure. The evolution called for a helocast from an MH-60 into black water, 300-yard swim to a simulated hostile vessel, fast rope onto the deck, clear 12 compartments against role players with simunition. Rivera's team inserted clean, moved like water through the ship. On the final compartment, the engine room, pitch black, 130 degrees. A role player panicked and fired a real 9mm round instead of sim. The bullet clipped Rivera's left trapezius, tore a groove through muscle and out the back of her shoulder. Blood sprayed the bulkhead like Jackson Pollock. Her teammates froze. She didn't. She disarmed the shooter with her offhand, zip-tied him, applied her own pressure bandage while giving hand signals for exfil. They carried her up 3 ladders to the hello deck where the PJ screamed, "We're losing her!" Pulse was 180, pressure 80/40. She flatlined twice on the bird ride back to Balboa Naval Hospital. Surgeons spent 6 hours rebuilding the shoulder. When she woke up 48 hours later, the first thing she did was rip out her own breathing tube, sit up, and try to stand. The nurses tackled her back to the bed. Malone was there, sitting in the corner like a gargoyle. She grabbed her notepad, scribbled one line, and held it up. "When do we get back to training?" The doctors said 4 months minimum. She was back on the grinder in 21 days, doing push-ups with one arm while the other hung in a sling. Graduation day finally arrived, December 19, 2024. The trident pinning ceremony on the Coronado beach at sunset. The sky bleeding orange and purple over the Pacific. Families packed the wooden bleachers. Rivera's parents, both deaf, signing furiously in the front row, wore matching navy sweatshirts with her face screen-printed on the chest. When the commanding officer called Midshipman Elena Rivera, the entire class of 312 stood without orders. Brick Morrison, now her biggest fan and unofficial big brother, led a Huya Rivera chant that rattled windows in the Hotel del Coronado a mile away. She walked across the stage in dress whites, saluted Rear Admiral Hernandez, and for the first time in public did something that stopped every heart in the amphitheater. She took the microphone from the podium, tapped it once. The speakers crackled. A computer-generated voice, cold, clear, perfect, spoke the only words anyone ever heard from Ensign Elena Rivera. "Team first. Always." The place detonated. Grown men cried. Instructors looked away so nobody would see the tears. 6 months later, somewhere in the South China Sea, a U.S.-flagged submarine tender went dark. Official story. Mechanical failure. Unofficial story. A certain Mute Lieutenant Junior grade led a 6-man VBSS team from SEAL Team 3 onto a hostile fast-attack craft flying no flag, neutralized 23 PRC naval special operators, and rescued 31 American contractors being held for ransom in the bilge. She did it without firing a single live round, pressure points, zip ties, and the sheer force of a reputation that now preceded her like a storm front. The bodycam footage is still classified above top secret/SCI, but the citation for her Navy Cross simply reads, "Extraordinary heroism against an armed enemy while under direct fire, actions directly responsible for saving 31 American lives and preventing an international incident." Brick keeps a framed photo in his locker at Little Creek. Him flat on his back on that grinder 2 years earlier, blood trickling from his lip, Rivera standing over him with Sharpie still in hand. On the bottom she wrote the day after graduation. "Told you I'd make you carry my ruck." He smiles every time he sees it, because for the rest of his career he did exactly that, and considered it the highest honor of his life. Last month, somewhere in the Hindu Kush, a CIA case officer watched Rivera fast rope into a compound from a stealth Black Hawk, clear 3 rooms in 8 seconds, and carry a wounded teammate 400 meters to the exfil bird while returning fire with one hand. The officer sent a single encrypted text to Langley. "The ghost is real. Send more like her." So the next time someone tells you size matters, or that quiet people are weak, or that a woman can't hack it in the teams, remember Coronado, remember the grinder, remember the girl who never needed a voice to make the whole world shut up and listen. Drop your state in the comments. Were you watching from tonight? Texas, Ohio, California, New York, Florida, Alaska, somewhere in between. Let's see how far this story has traveled across the greatest country on earth. And if you felt that chill when she stood up after drowning, if your heart stopped when that bullet tore through her shoulder and she kept moving, do me a solid. Lock in with the platoon and tap subscribe. Mom and Dad are still watching from Colorado Springs, and they'd love to see 1 million new teammates show up for their daughter. Huya. If a story this raw still moves you, do what the finest operators do when they find one of their own. Lock in, join the platoon, and tap the subscribe button so this channel can keep telling the legends that history tries to bury.